All right, guys, before we get started today, a big thank you to our partner, Microsoft Surface, celebrating 10 years of partnership with the NFL. As the official laptop, tablet, and sideline technology provider for the LA Chargers, Microsoft Surface provides players and coaches with the tools to succeed both on and off the field every day. Learn more about Surface at surface.com. And welcome into the final drive, a playoff edition. We're taping this Monday afternoon. It's been a winding road, but the Chargers end their regular season 10-7. They're going to take on the Jacksonville Jaguars on Saturday night on NBC. As always, joined by team reporter Hayley Elwood and senior writer Eric Smith. And guys, we knew before the Chargers kicked off in Denver that they were the 5 seed. It was fun to watch that Tennessee-Jacksonville game because you kind of knew that one of those two teams were going to be the opponent. And here we go, Hayley. It's the Jags and the Chargers.
Got a week 3 rematch here on deck. I actually saw a tweet. I think, correct me if I'm mistaken, and I might look when I get a chance. I think every single one of these games this weekend is a rematch from the entire season. Eric's shaking his nodding his head, so we're good. So I think, which is crazy when you think about it. We have a couple, obviously, the Bengals and Ravens, or a divisional rivalry, but every single one of these matchups, Bills and Dolphins, they've seen each other. They know. Some obviously a little more familiar than the Chargers and the Jags, but yeah, I know that there's a lot to cover. I'll just sort of, lay out kind of the broad picture, and I'm sure we'll dive more into it. Obviously, week 3 was the ribs game. It was the game that everyone's on the field waiting for Justin Herbert. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? He did. The Chargers lost that game big time. That was not a great performance offensively, defensively. You can say a lot had to do with obviously maybe Justin Herbert coming back for that game after the rib cartilage injury in week 2. To me, a bigger thing though, when I was kind of going back to this game, was the fact that Corey Linsley didn't play in it. And we know that he is going to obviously play this weekend and be on the field with the Chargers. And that to me is almost a bigger thing. Keenan didn't play, obviously we know, but Mike was there in week 3. To me, the Corey factor is huge because we have seen throughout this entire season what it's like when he's not in these games and what happens to this Chargers team. So I think just having that steady presence, getting maybe a second crack at it is going to be great. But I think this is going to be a really fun matchup. We talked a lot all week and pundits talked a lot about, it's going to be the Saturday afternoon game because the AFC South always plays Saturday afternoon for the last decade. Whatever it is, but you got the good flow game, as we mentioned. You got 2 really young, awesome quarterbacks in the AFC who are going to get the chance to go at it. And obviously, I know it's never quarterback versus quarterback, but there was that other tweet, this stat that Patrick Mahomes is the oldest quarterback in the AFC in the playoffs at 27 years old, which is absolutely insane when you think about it. So you have this young, new generation of quarterbacks, and this is just going to be a great matchup purely from that standpoint as well.
Yeah, you go back to that matchup, 38-10, and you mentioned it. I think Corey Linsley was the biggest. That combination with Justin, his first game back after a broken rib cartilage, we didn't even know if he was going to play in that football game. And then you mentioned Keenan not playing. That's the game where Joey Bosa goes out. Rashawn Slater goes out for the season. So this Chargers team, I remember Austin Ekeler said yesterday, he's like, I don't think I ran for a yard in that game. It was just, it was one of those games in September where they were just out of sync. They were injured. And now, Eric, an opportunity to get a little revenge.
Yeah, someone else who got injured, Jalen Guyton. That's the game that he tore his ACL. I mean, just the plethora, right, of injuries that the Chargers endured in that game. It's weird, though, because, I know we're all going to look back at that game and analyze it, but to me, it feels like that game was 5 years ago. It really does. And I think the Chargers are a much different team than they were. I think Jacksonville, even then, are a much different team than they were back then, too. Because after the Jags won that game, they were 2-1, and everyone thought, oh, man, they're on the upswing here. Then they lost 5 in a row, and then they obviously rallied late, to win the AFC South and obviously a 5-game win streak to end the season. I just think it's a new season. I think that's my biggest thought and takeaway right now on Monday afternoon is I'm sure we're going to, like I said, we're going to look back and there's stuff to take from that game for sure. One thing I want to look is how fast did Trevor Lawrence get rid of the ball? Because I know it seems like his time to release was just a second and a half. It felt like it was, right? But I just think like overall both teams are just so different. It's a new year. Like, you know, like the playoffs are such a different like animal. Like you just kind of start fresh. I'm excited. I think, like Hayley said, I think it's going to be a great game. Like two young, like fun quarterbacks, two young, like fun teams. But I'm not really putting much into week 3. To me, that was like a long, long time ago.
Yeah. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about the Chargers and the starters playing a majority of Week 18. They lose that game to Denver. I think the good news that we took from Brandon Staley's press conference today is it was a back contusion for Mike Williams, and he is expected to practice this week, which, Hayley, is paramount for this team. I mean, we see what Mike means to this offense, what he's done during this winning streak. He means just about everything to what they do as far as the passing game is concerned. It was good to see Keenan, and Keenan said he needed the time. He needed the reps in Week 18. He had a pair of touchdowns, and the fact that he's only played, he said, 6 or 7 games, it was good for him to get a full game in. But I look at the defense, and so many good vibes going into that Denver game. They gave up some big plays to Russell Wilson and company with the majority of the starters out there. So I wonder if they can take some things from that Week 18 loss and apply it to this upcoming week versus Jacksonville, also recognizing that, Trevor Lawrence kind of had his way with his secondary in Week 3.
He really did. And that was something, too. I mean, you mentioned the big chunk plays that they gave up against Denver, but they also gave up 205 on the ground and had been doing a really great job sort of containing the run to a certain extent and just got gashed at that point. I do think this defense, though, in many ways is very different. And whatever you want to say about Week 18, it happened. It's in the books. It's done. I think, to Eric's point, this is a new sort of chapter, a new sort of era, if you will, of the 2022 season as it extends into 2023. And I think, there's some things that you certainly have to clean up. Even offensively, there's some things that you have to clean up. But I think, this is kind of the time that you put everything that's happened in the past behind you and you kind of just move forward. It's funny, I filmed something at the facility today. I was driving back home and I was listening to Sirius XM NFL radio, and our good buddy Rayshawn Jenkins was on. And they asked him about, this game and going back to Week 3. And he said, he's like, part of me almost thinks that in Week 3, the Chargers may have underestimated us as the Jaguars just a little bit. And maybe that is true at that point. These are not your same old Jags, though, as we have now learned. And defensively on their side of the ball, they really won that game for the team against the Tennessee Titans just a couple weeks ago. So Rayshawn did mention, he goes, honestly, like, we had our way with them, but he's like, something tells me this game is going to come down to the wire. And the three of us will sit here on this chat, on this call, and probably say, yeah, that's likely going to happen, that this is probably going to be a tough one on all sides. But yeah, I think that, excuse me, again, you've seen now an entire season of Trevor Lawrence and what he's been able to do in this second year with Doug Peterson and just the phenomenal leaps and bounds that he took. Defensively, I think back to what Brandon Staley said last week about guys like Kyle Van Noy, Morgan Fox. They're just more comfortable now, having been through this Chargers defensive system. So will that maybe even out? Will they maybe sort of, I don't know if I necessarily want to call it a revenge game, if you will, but maybe sort of correct some things that went wrong in that week 3 match to hopefully flip the script and end up on the other side of it this week?
Eric, I look at turnovers, and I feel like you could point to that almost every game as a deciding factor. But when I see the Chargers fumble the ball a couple of times against Denver, that can't happen in the postseason. And on the other side, I look at a guy like Trevor Lawrence. He's had some fumbles throughout the course of this season. You get Joey Bosa back. You have Khalil Mack, two of the best strip sack artists in football. Turnovers could decide this game. And I wonder if Joey and Khalil can get to Trevor before he gets the ball out of his hands so quickly. That could be something that potentially could decide this game, frankly.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we saw flashes from Joey yesterday in Denver. It seems like he's starting to kind of get his groove back. I know he didn't play a ton, but to me, he had like a little bit more like pass rushing juice than I saw the week before. Yeah, so if he can continue to grow, that's great. And him and Khalil teaming up together, I think we're still kind of waiting. I mean, we saw it like week 1, week 2. We're still kind of waiting for those two to really like connect and really like bring it together, and I think they can. But it's funny you mentioned turnovers. I mean, Brandon Daly talked about that earlier this afternoon too. Just how like taking care of the ball is paramount in a regular season game. Yeah, you can't even overstate it in a playoff game because one fumble and that could be the difference between a winner or loss. After he said that, I went and looked up where the Chargers finished overall, and they were tied for 7th with a +5 turnover margin. The team they tied with is Jacksonville, of course, which is kind of makes for a fun little side note going into the game because both teams were relatively good at protecting the ball. You are right about the fumbles, though, because I think Jacksonville had 13 fumbles lost this year. I don't know how many Lawrence, how many of those that Lawrence had, but yeah, you're right. If they can get one, right, that's all it takes. Just get one strip sack on him, get the ball, at the 30-yard line, get it in good field position. As we know, right, that could be the difference between a winner or a loss.
And then you wonder how much experience factors into these games, Hayley. Obviously, Doug Peterson's won a Super Bowl. This will be Brandon Staley's first time in the playoffs as a head coach. But then you look at some of the Chargers players. I mean, we were here in 2018 when Derwin was a rookie. Keenan was out there. Joey was out there. Austin was out there, and a couple other guys. And then I think about the players that were brought in this offseason, the Sebastian Joseph Days, the Morgan Foxes, the Kyle Van Noys, with that championship caliber experience. And you wonder, will that factor in at all? I mean, we've seen Kyle Van Noy really every single week during the last 5 games where they've won 4 of these last 5, have some sort of impact play, whether it's a strip sack or an interception or just a big tackle for loss. He's been everywhere, and I would expect that to continue this Saturday.
Yeah, I would too. And it's funny, I'm going back to week 3 right now. The Chargers defense had no sacks on Trevor Lawrence in that game. So that obviously also needs to change to just have an impact and be able to affect him. I absolutely think that sort of dominance will continue. I mean, we heard a lot in the offseason about bringing in guys who have championship pedigrees and it not being it's not a coincidence. Like it was deliberate, and it was bringing in guys who have that experience and who have been there before and know what it's like. It is funny though, because I think today Brian Dable from the Giants said experience is overrated. It's about how you prepare. And sure, there's probably something to that too. And I think that's something that Jacksonville's talking about. In that same Rayshawn interview, he talked about how they are an extremely young team. I think he said he's one of the oldest guys on there with 6 years experience, which is crazy to think that, 6 years gets you to be like sort of the top of the food chain there in Jacksonville because they are just so young. But they've got a lot of playmakers. I mean, they've had a bajillion first overall picks, if you will, to get that team to where it needs to be now. But I think some of these guys, I think you'll see that leadership. I think you've seen it sort of step up over the last couple of weeks with the emergence of Kyle Van Noy, with what Morgan Fox has done. He's had Super Bowl experience before playing with the Rams back in the 18 after the 18 season. So I think, I absolutely think that you will see that. And I think that's what you need, especially to guide some of these guys along. Even someone, again, like Corey Linsley, who didn't play in the Super Bowl necessarily, but has playoff experience to help guide someone like Justin Herbert, even through that experience of getting to now this new phase of football, which again, it's just a game. We know that, but the magnitude of it is much, much larger, and the stakes are obviously much higher.
Eric, I don't want to get too far into yesterday's game and the results and the stats, but the Chargers didn't run the ball particularly well against the Broncos. I'm just pulling up the stats from this game against the Jags on the ground. 12 for 26. Austin Ekeler, 4 carries, 5 yards. Joshua Kelly, 1 for -3. DeAndre Carter, 1 for -5. Sony Michel was the leading rusher, 5 for 22. So when you average 2.2 yards a pop on the ground, that will not get it done. We've seen the Chargers in the running game, especially in the red zone, kind of come to life here in December and into January. And Austin knows that he's going to have a pretty big game for the Chargers to win on Saturday.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of said earlier, there's stuff to take away from week 3, but it's so long ago that I think that you can't really like focus too much on that. I mean, one thing to take away is that the Chargers could not run the ball, and Austin Ekeler, I mean, he talked about that last night in the locker room in Denver. He said he had no rushing yards, so I mean, you have to give him some credit. He had what, 5?
He had 5, yeah.
Okay, all right. But yeah, that's not much. I mean, I think that's the game where we had some turnovers early. We got down early, and we really just didn't run the ball hardly at all in the second half. But yeah, I mean, the Chargers have shown a little bit more pop running the ball in the last like 4 or 5 weeks. And we've talked a lot on this podcast about just the balance that offers. Like we said, we don't expect the run game to go for 200 yards, but 80 to 100 yards or so, like 110 yards, that just provides a little bit of pressure off of Herbert and provides a more balanced attack. We'll have to see if they can do it, because one thing that I came away impressed with Saturday night watching the Jags and Titans was that the Jags run defense looked pretty good against Derrick Henry. It seems like he was getting hit before or at the line of scrimmage a lot. So that's definitely a key storyline for Saturday night.
Looking at these stats, too, James Robinson isn't on this ball club anymore either. He had 17 for 100 and a 50-yard touchdown. ETN's kind of been their bell cow, and they're a much different team than they were in September. But I can't help but think about when that game started, we weren't sure, Hayley, if Justin was even going to play in the game. We had no idea. We thought it was going to be Chase Daniel, frankly. It was a Thursday night game against Kansas City where Justin hurt his ribs. Corey went out in that second half. So you're not only is Justin playing probably when he was probably hurt at its peak in the season, but he's doing it without his all-pro center, like you said, and no Keenan Allen. So I think these 17-game seasons have really revealed that they're way too long, right?
They're way too long. You
could be like 2 or 3 iterations of yourself in a season, right? And the Chargers, I think, really found themselves defensively. I loved what I saw that first drive of the game, marching down the field in less than 4 minutes, touchdown to Keenan in Denver. So I think the offense has kind of found its rhythm with Mike and Keenan on the field at the same time.
Yeah, and it's funny because I went back and looked at week 3 too, because I wanted to see with no Keenan Allen, what was Mike Williams' impact in that game. He had 1 reception for 15 yards. It was a touchdown. But it was really the Joshua Palmer, Jalen Guyton show. And obviously Eric mentioned that Guyton had gotten hurt in that game. But, I think that one stat that the Chargers had 6 receivers hit 500 yards this year was just crazy, making them the second team in NFL history to do so, because you've seen the general complement of what Justin Herbert has had to do this entire year with guys out, guys in. Oh, these 2 are out. All right, Palmer and Carter, like, you're up. And to spread it that evenly, essentially, and have all those guys hit that is just bananas to an extent. I do think, though, and we said this last week in the Rams game, Mike Williams, man, he is just the straw that stirs the drink on this Chargers offense, and he just really adds another dimension with the contested catches, and his impact cannot be overstated. And so we mentioned we get the good news today, essentially, that he should be back in practice this week. The indication, Staley said, is that he would play on Saturday against the Jaguars. But, is he 100%? How healthy is he? He's just such a huge difference maker. And I think when obviously you have the tandem, you get that extra element on this offense and in this passing game. And so that is just something that it's really hard to defend. We talk about Mike Williams all the time. His contested catches, they're not 50-50s. They're usually 80-20s, because he just finds this way to not only make the catch, but get both feet in bounds, do these crazy things. That Rams game, Chris, you were like, hello, hi, you had 2 of these, and they were insane. So I think offensively, yeah, they have been able to find their groove. Will they be able to kind of take it to this next level this week when it really matters? Because now it's win or go home.
100%. And it would be pure speculation to know, what Mike's going to look like on Saturday. You hope he's full go along with Keenan. But, Eric, one of the things I think we've started to see in December is Justin leaning on the tight end a little bit more, whether it be in the red zone with Gerald or kind of a big play from Donald here or there. The tight ends could maybe be the sneaky X factor in this game when you consider all the weapons that Justin has at his disposal, and let's say Mike may not be 100%. You hope that he is, but if he's not, you have two big tight ends that you can get the ball to.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and we've sort of hit on this a little bit before on the podcast. Is when you get to the playoffs, the other team is gonna like try to lock down your best guys, right? And for us, that's Keenan, Mike, and Austin. We thought, Mike, like you said, one catch in week 3. Keenan didn't play. They shut down Austin in the run game. They're gonna try to do that again. So the way you counter that, you need other people to step up. The Chargers have talked all year long about how they like the depth, and the guys that can step up in a pinch and get the job done. You're going to need that in the playoff because, so after so many games this year, how many times did we hear Brandon Staley say it took everybody in this locker room to win? Everybody, from 1 to 53, and that's what it takes. And that's what you're going to have to do in the playoffs. Like, I'm not saying Gerald Everett needs to go out and have 10 catches for 150 and 3 scores, but 50, 60 receiving yards, a couple first downs, just keep the offense on the field. You have to do it. Gerald is another guy. I think he has some good playoff experience with the Rams. So yeah, I think Parham is starting to come on a little bit. We saw that big play, his touchdown, obviously against the Rams, but he had that nice diving catch yesterday. So again, no one's asking these guys to carry the offense. It's sort of an all hands on deck approach. That's certainly what the Chargers are going to need.
Hayley, they're 5-4 on the road this year, and they had some tough contests too. You had a 3-point game in Kansas City. You have the close defeat to the 49ers, really, really shorthanded. But do you think that the experience that they've kind of garnered here during the season on the road can help them against a Jacksonville team that is much younger than the Chargers, frankly, right? They get into this. I'm not saying they're just happy to be here because, they're going to want to win and advance here. But, this is a team that, we looked at in October, Tennessee was running away with this division, and it was not even close. For Jacksonville just to be in this position right now is remarkable. So I wonder if the Chargers kind of use some of the experience that they've got from the road this year and apply this head on Saturday night.
Are you going to make me go Melvin Ingram on you right now and bust out an ASAP, any squad, any plays from?
Please do it exactly like Melvin did it too.
Oh, no, I cannot. That number 54 is him for a reason, and shout out to Melvin Ingram. Also in the playoffs. Congratulations, Mel, with the Miami Dolphins.
There you go.
Yeah, I think I think this team had, I make the joke, but it's kind of true, and it's sort of an identity that they've formed even a few years ago to an extent. Just going on the road, attacking it, doing what you can. I do think, though, that Jacksonville game looked really freaking fun against the Titans. And I think that environment, putting it at night, Jacksonville's a wild place. We've been there before. It's just, they're pools. There's a lot of things that happen.
There's mascots.
My guy, Jackson DeVille. But I expect a really, really great atmosphere, and I think it's one that the Chargers will be ready for, but I do agree with you. I think it's one that the Jaguars are going to be ready for. They feel that they have earned this, and they did. They got the win to get here. And I think when you talk about veteran leadership and you talk about experience, their head coach, Doug Peterson, he's not going to just let this team kind of lay down and be like, yay, we made it to the dance. All right, good, on to 2023. I do expect it to be a fight. But I do think that the Chargers' experience of playing some really, really tough road games will come into it. It's an interesting travel schedule, though. The fact that you're going to leave on a Friday, you're going to head out there for a Saturday game that's at, 8:15 p.m. Eastern time? That is, hey, at least you're not playing the early game, which is essentially, that's just so early in that regard. But that's a long kind of hurry up and wait sort of situation. And I know Brandon Staley talked about the preparation in this week and sort of getting guys acclimated to a schedule, because I think that is going to be huge too. But this team has never sort of let East Coast trips, long distance trips, and they haven't had a ton of them this year, but they've never used that as an excuse. So I think it'll be really interesting, but I do expect a really fun environment, fun game out there.
Chris, one quick note about East Coast. So I think I looked it up. We've had 3 Eastern time zone games this year with Atlanta, Indy, and Cleveland, and we're 3-0. So just a note.
There you go. They could be 4-0 at around midnight on Saturday potentially, and that would lead to the divisional playoffs, which would be a whole nother conversation that we're not quite prepared to talk about yet. But
we're not looking ahead. We're not going to look ahead, guys.
We're not looking ahead here. But I will ask Hayley for her Doppler 3000. Do we have a weather update in Jacksonville?
We do. As of right now, it is a high, a little chilly for, what is this, North Florida? I'm not good at geography, guys. Florida, Georgia line there. That's that area. Oh, shoot, I just lost it. I think it's a high of 54 and a low of 35. So that is actually a little cool.
It's a little chilly. The pool may be covered.
Don't get me wrong, there's probably going to be some people in the pool. Maybe Jacksonville will also get in the pool, but little chilly. But hey, good experience. Anything that can. I know Brandon Staley was not on the weather train in regards to the Denver game and playing in the cold. I get it. It's a game. You just got to play. But hey, it's not. There's no rain on the schedule, and in Florida, that could obviously impact a lot as well.
We're obviously going to know so much more throughout the week with updates at practice and pressers with Coach Staley and the coordinators and some of the players in the locker room. But we can look ahead a little bit. I'll put you guys on the spot. Maybe just a player, Eric, that you think could have an impact on this game that isn't your typical Derwin, Justin, Mike type player.
Yeah, that's a good question. From what I saw Saturday night, and the Jags Titans, it looks like the Jacksonville edge rushers looked really good coming off the edge, both run and pass. So I'm going to pick Jamari Sawyer. I think we've talked about him. He's kind of been an underrated guy all year. Maybe think of where the Chargers would be if he hadn't played as well. They frankly might not be in the playoffs, really. So I'm going to keep my eye on him. And one thing with him, we'll, as we say this on the day where Georgia's trying to go back-to-back, I don't think he will be fazed at all by the playoffs, right? Because he has played in huge games in college. I think he'll use that experience well. He hasn't been fazed all year, right? Being thrown into the starting left tackle, trying to protect Justin. I'm going to keep an eye on Jamari, and I hope he continues his great rookie year.
He may have some plays against his old teammate Trayvon Walker potentially.
There you go.
Right?
Yep.
Hayley, what about you? Anybody either on offense or defense that isn't that all-pro, premium Pro Bowl type player we always talk about?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Michael Davis. I mentioned him last week, too. He had a really nice pass defense in the Denver game. And I think when you look at the Jacksonville receiving core, Christian Kirk in that season finale, he had 6 receptions for 99 yards and a touchdown. He really, he came alive in that game. And I think there are other receivers, Zay Jones, Marvin Jones Jr. There's a lot to go around when you look at that group right there. And I think Michael Davis, obviously, I can't remember. I don't know if he started in that game necessarily, but he certainly started, when he fell into that role after J.C. Jackson got injured midway through the season or so. He's really come along, and I said this last week, and I'll say it again. He talked a lot about just really kind of focusing this year and really sort of honing in and being, again, more comfortable in this scheme, which we've heard a lot of guys talk about is not necessarily the easiest defensive scheme to learn, but once you're sort of cerebral with it, it definitely seems to come to you. So I think he's been playing some really good football as of late, and this secondary is going to need to shore some things up if they want to have a chance and play better this week too.
Man, it's going to be fun. I'll tell you this, NBC loves the Chargers.
They love the Chargers,
I think it's
man.
their 4th NBC game, 7th primetime game this season, counting the 6 games in the regular season. So a battle of 2 young quarterbacks, a lot of fun storylines that we covered a bunch of them here, but they will all continue to unfold as this week progresses. Guys, always fun. We'll do it again next Monday on the final drive. Give us maybe 24 hours to take a breath either which way on Sunday, because we'll have that day off and get into it on Monday morning. So for Hayley Elwood and Eric Smith, I'm Chris Hayre. This has been the Final Drive.